Okay, it's time to talk about indirect heat. Now, indirect heat is like the key determining factor for accomplishing traditional low and slow American style barbecue. And we're going to go through all the details you need to know on how to do that on a kettle grill. Now, in order to show you how to do that on a kettle grill, I'm gonna go and get one. First things we're gonna do is what you probably heard of already, is to push charcoal briquettes to one side. So I'm gonna get one. All right, then there are different ways of getting indirect heat on a charcoal kettle grill. So not only can you push charcoal to one side, we can also build what's known as a snake using the snake method. So I'm going to get another one so we can compare. That's good. That's a good way of learning to compare. But then I thought, actually there's what I call an accessory for the kettle called the slow and sear, and the slow and sear makes things easier. So might as well get another one so we can compare how that works also. Alright, we're getting set up. So we have a few different options, but like if you don't want to use a slow and sear, what can you do instead? Well, what I usually do is I put a brick into the grill and then shove the coal to one side using that brick, and that means you can pile it up high, and I'm going to show you exactly how and why. So I'm just going to get another one. Alright, I think we're ready to experiment, but one more thing I came to think of, it's kind of a fun experiment I do sometimes when teaching barbecue classes, is how many or how few briquettes do you need to keep a consistent low and slow temp in the kettle grill. I'm thinking like 240 Fahrenheit or 110 to 120 Celsius, so let me get the final one. Okay, got the whole class assembled. Let's get some briquettes and fire this thing up. So, starting with the first grill, I'm gonna get the lid off, get the grates off, and we're gonna add some briquettes. So, I did mention putting charcoal to one side, and that's what we've done here. As you can see, I've piled the briquettes up to one side. Well, I guess side is a kind of a tricky term when it comes to a circle, but you get my point. So, how can this work in our favor? Well, you have the heat over here, and then here where there's no charcoal, this is where you place your food. The whole point of this is getting the charcoal or briquettes warming up the air moves over food and then out through the vent. That gives you indirect heat because the charcoal heats up the air heats up the food. That's where the indirect comes in. So what's good about this? Well, you have a clear separation, or relatively clear. The drawback, I guess, is, well, there's no clear separator here between the food and the charcoal. Why is that a problem? Well, there's going to be radiating heat in all directions, and quite a bit of radiating heat this way, almost targeting the food. So if you're going to do a low and slow cook, like 6 to 8 hours or even more, then that's going to be a bit of a problem. We need something to block the heat. The second thing is looking at the shape of the briquettes. They're quite thin at the ends and quite thick in the middle. So even though this is going to last quite a few hours, you're going to have to tweak the vents and make sure you don't overshoot on temp. So when it starts out, it's going to be relatively easy, but temp is most likely going to increase when you reach the middle where it's thickest, and then taper off again. And the third and final thing is, typically you cook something low and slow for quite some time. When it's almost done, you move it over to sear. Now, searing with this pile of briquettes is going to be a bit tricky because, as you can see, it slopes down quite a bit. Why is that a problem? Well, as you know, heat is being reduced by the distance squared, meaning it's going to be quite a bit hotter here, where we're closer to the briquettes, than over here, where it's quite a few inches down. So that makes a big difference. In reality, the searing area where the effective searing is going to take place is going to be this tiny area right here, very small. We want to utilize the whole surface, but we can't really due to the slope. So there are a few ways of fixing that. Let's look at the second example. All right, let's try something different in this grill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add briquettes like before. But to make sure it stays up, I'm going to add an old brick like that. I'm going to place it to one side, and then I can keep refilling. Now, this is better in many ways. For one, the shape of this old briquette is going to be a bit thinner right here over the middle, which is good. It's not perfect, but it's better than the first case. And that means even more even temps. The second thing that's really good is you have something that's blocking the radiating heat hitting the food from the side. So now all heat goes up and then across the grates and then out. So this is a real cheap and effective way of getting that accomplished. The third thing we solved with this is all of a sudden you can pile the briquettes up high all across the surface. So when you go to sear, you can see here that you have quite a bigger, the area for effective searing is much bigger because the distance from the grates to the charcoal is the same here and here and here, etc., and all across. So all of a sudden the effective sear area has increased by a magnitude. And this is really, really good. So real smart way, simple way, and this brick, even though it's not fireproof, it's going to last quite a few times. If you plan on doing this for a long time, I would suggest replacing this with a fireproof brick. Or even better, get two, because then you can place them like that, at a slight angle, and even out the thickness of the briquettes even more. And that's better. So, second version. Now, all right, let's take a look at option number 3, because we have quite a few options. Now, looking at this one, I have put a slow and sear in it. Now, what is a slow and sear? Well, this is a stainless accessory with a removable water pan. That's really handy. So what you do is you fill briquettes in this one. You add hot water to the water pan and then get the fire started in one end. So what's the big advantage of this one then? Well, for one, you get something that lasts definitely longer than the grill because it's stainless steel grade steel, and that's really good. The second thing is you can use the water pan if you want to for added moisture and also evening out temps. And the third thing is, just like with the brick, you can stack the briquettes quite tall and get a really good surface, effective surface area, because just like with the brick, you have the same distance here between the grates and the fire. And this one comes right up to underneath the grates, so it's going to be a very short distance, meaning high heat. So let's add some briquettes to this one. So when I light this one, I light a few briquettes, 5 or 6 or 8 depending on weather, if it's in the winter or not, and then I drop them in right here, and then the fire is going to spread slowly across the whole batch of briquettes, and it's going to last me a long time. Typically I get an 8-hour cook out of this one. Same thing goes for the brick. Another advantage, of course, is you have effectively an inner wall, so you can see there's a bit of air here behind the slow and sear and the outer surface of the kettle. That's really good, not so much in the summer, but in the winter, because that provides added insulation, meaning it's going to keep temps steadier. And the water pan you can use if you want. I use it almost all the time. The major benefit is, well, it adds a bit of moisture because the water in it is going to be evaporating. But the bigger and more important factor, I would say, is that the water in the water pan acts like a thermal mass, meaning it's going to slow down or even out temp fluctuations, because it's going to take a bit of time to heat up the water, and once the temp drops in the charcoal bed, the water is going to release its or drop in temp, releasing heat. So that's going to even out the temp curve as we go along. So that's really handy. All right, so how do you get the water pan in if you don't have a slow and sear? Well, let me show you. What I typically do is get one of these disposable aluminum pans, fill it with hot water, and place it right over the charcoal where it's burning. Now, the trick is you want this to evaporate slowly, like simmer, not boil furiously. So move this so you see where you get just the right temp. So you can see it's simmering slightly, but not splashing water. If it's too hot, just move it away. I guess the drawback of using this manual method is that after a few hours you're going to have to move this one a bit, but it's not too hard. I should also say that this is a really tiny one. Get one size bigger. I could only find this one and a really big one, which is too big in my house, but get one size bigger and you'll be all right, because the amount of water in here is just too little to have any real effect. But I hope you get the point by illustrating this way. So what about the snake method? Well, let's try it out. Now, this is not a snake yet, it's just a mess, but the whole concept is basically that you pile briquettes. And this is where your potential OCD behavior comes in, but you start piling them. I usually build 2 and 2 like this. I'm gonna form a snake around the shape of the kettle. I think, if you ask me, I'd rather call it the domino method, because that's really what's gonna happen. We're going to light a few briquettes right here, and then the fire is going to spread slowly, hour after hour, and keep moving around the circle. And one layer is not enough, so typically I go 2 by 2 like this. But again, that depends on weather, how cold it is, and how windy it is. Because compared to a Kamado grill, this one doesn't have any insulation. Let me get a few more briquettes. Alright, so it's time to light the snake. How do you do that? Well, I've fired up some briquettes in my charcoal chimney starter, and now we're going to pour them over, because this is going to be the start of the snake. I'm going to pile them on just like that, so we get a good start here. Now, firing these up is real quick, but you're going to have to wait like 20-30 minutes for this to come up to temp. The nice thing about this is that the snake is evenly thick all the way around, and that's really, really good, because that means you're going to get super consistent temps. Once you dial this in using the top and the bottom vent, it's going to like flatline for hours. So how long is this going to last then? Well, I've clocked it quite a few times, and for every quarter of a circle I get 3 hours out of this one. Of course, it's going to vary a bit depending on weather, if it's in the icy cold winter or not, but this is a super convenient way of doing it. The only thing you need to think about here is where the thermometer is located. Never ever trust the thermometer in the lid. As you can see, if I place it like that, the thermometer is going to be right over the fire, which means it's going to show completely the wrong values. 3 hours later, when the snake's over here, it's going to be quite a big distance between the thermometer and the fire, and then it's going to be closer to the correct temp. But the main problem is that it's never located where the food is. The only way to measure temp is where the food is. So get a separate thermometer and put that clip in and clip it to the grates. So in this case, if the food is here, you measure temp here. Easy peasy. All right, so we've gone through quite a few of them. Actually, we have one more experiment to do, and that's to figure out how many or how few briquettes does it need to maintain a steady temp of 120 Celsius or 240 Fahrenheit, roughly. So I've lit a few, and we're going to drop them into, well, actually this one, which is the final grill we're going to play with, and we'll see. The reason I'm doing this is to show you, because that gives you a really good indication of how long the snake or the slow and sear or the brick method is going to give you in terms of heat, consecutive temp over time. And also, I think for many people it might be an eye opener that you don't need that many. So We're gonna dump these in here, we're gonna plug in the thermometer and start checking. So we're gonna get rid of the lid, get the grates off, and I'm gonna pile in some briquettes. I've lit a few in the chimney. They're all lashed over, so now I'm gonna make a small pile here because they're quite compact. I'm gonna have to stack them like that to get consistent heat. See if I can make a small pile here. It was a bit difficult, but that should be good. There's 10 of them in there, so we'll see. I'm gonna add the thermometer here just like I normally do when cooking. So here's the fire, here's the food. We're gonna get the lid on. Bottom vent is open, top vent is open. I'm gonna place the top vent here so you force the hot air over the food. But I'm gonna leave this for 30 minutes and see if we can come up to temp. Got my thermometer here, so I'm gonna see what that reads in a short while. All right, we're now 10 minutes in and this dial says 100, which is 212 Fahrenheit, so that's really good. Still climbing a bit, so I haven't started dialing it down, but with 10 briquettes, now we're at 101. See, you don't need that many, and that's a really good thing. On the other hand, you're gonna have to stack quite a few, and then you understand that a few briquettes is the temp, provides the temp you need, but if you provide enough of them, that's gonna last you for hours and hours. I'm gonna let this one keep climbing for a bit to see where it stays. And another 5 minutes later and we just hit 225 Fahrenheit, which is 105, 106 Celsius. So 10 briquettes, not bad. Still climbing. We're now at 110. So now we've done quite a few different experiments. You can see there are different methods, whether when you want to use the snake method, the brick, slow and sear, etc. There are quite a few options. All of them work. It all depends on what suits your situation, your grill / smoker. So what you should do now is go home, experiment, play out and do a few dry runs. I think dry runs are brilliant because that really takes all the guesswork out of maintaining a low steady temp on your grill to accomplish that true American style barbecue, which is nice. Just one more thing I'd like to mention is that I did one modification here, and that's actually put a gasket in here. That gasket around the lid really seals up the grill so air comes in through the bottom vent, out through the top vent, and you don't have any leakage. That really helps maintain temp. I did a separate video on that. I'm going to put an info link up here so you can check it out. Except for that, go out, fire up the grill and start cooking some low, slow American barbecue. And thanks for watching.